Hello folks. Okay, this time we'll start getting into some of the control structures for bash. So the first one we'll do is selection, right? The if statement. We mentioned in an earlier session that we have the square brackets, again the test command to go through and evaluate simple expressions as true or false. So we're going to see this crop up quite often in our if statements. And the basic syntax is if, no big surprise there, the expression you want to evaluate, then the thing to do if it's true. Elif is the keyword for else if. And again, no big surprises. Again, the expression you want to evaluate, then whatever it should do, and then an else case. So you can have as many of the elifs as you like. They're not required. You can have a standalone if. You can have an if with just an else. Again, the syntax shouldn't, or the structure shouldn't be too much of a surprise. It's just getting used to the specific keywords and the square brackets. Now, again, I mentioned that in bash we assume one command per line, and we mentioned that the square brackets were a command, an oddly named one, but a command. So if we want to throw the then keyword on the same line, we'll need to throw a semicolon in between them. I like to use this syntax just because it's a little bit more compact. You will see lots of people who actually put the then on the next line. I don't mind which you use as long as you're reasonably consistent about it. So we've got this idea here. We're going to say, okay, if x is greater than 2, then do one thing. Otherwise, if x is less than 2, do something else. And otherwise, do some third thing. So the only other really fun and joyous part of these expressions is to do numeric comparisons. So to compare integers, you use these kinds of keywords, -gt for greater than, -lt for less than, ge for greater than or equal to, le for less than or equal to, eq for equal, ne for not equal. So you don't use the less than, greater than signs, that kind of thing, or the double equal signs or anything like that for comparing numbers. Again, bash assumes that most of the time it's dealing with text. So the less thans and greater thans and those kinds of operators, right, the actual less than sign is reserved for string comparisons. So if you want to do arithmetic comparisons, again, it's the -gt or -lt or -ne or whatever it might be. So that's going to bite us all at different points over the term, but it is something that you just wind up getting used to in bash. So we've got the basics of the if statements, and again, the comparison operators with the actual signs, the less than, the greater than, the not equal, are reserved for use with string comparisons, not integers. So you're using the -gt, -le, that kind of thing for integer comparisons. Again, you will find that since that opening square bracket is the command name, bash can be pretty picky about whether or not you have white space around it, right? You should have white space around that, otherwise it thinks you're typing in some different command. And the same can go for the closing square bracket, right? It's got to be able to recognize that that's a separate argument to it. So you will run into probably white space issues if you're trimming out spaces around those things. Usual idea, the exclamation mark is the not operator, so you can throw that in front if not, and then there's a space there, $x equals $y, so this is doing string comparison of x and y to see if they're equal, then, blah, 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 blah. And if you're using the single square brackets, then to do compound expressions where you want to say if this or this or this, or if this and this and this, the compound expression operators are -o and -a. Right? So if you wanted to say if x is equal to y or x is greater than z, then this would be the syntax with the single square brackets. Right? Your first expression, the -a, your second expression. So that does take a little bit of getting used to if you're using the single square brackets. It's one of the reasons people tend to prefer using the double square brackets, but we'll come back to that in a minute. There are a bunch of built-in Unary tests where you can just test something about one single operand. So usually this is focused around file names. So if you want to test if something is a file, a readable file, then it's just -f and then the file name. If you want to test if it's a directory, it's -d. If you want to check if it's a readable, writable, or executable, right, -r, -w, -x. If you want to check that the name isn't an empty string, you can use the -n. So, whole variety of different unary expressions that we can play with as well. All right, and I mentioned the double square brackets are nicer in some ways. So if you're used to the C-style syntax for ors and ands in compound expressions, right, the double pipes or the double and signs, then you can use those in the double square brackets. So if I wanted to say if x is equal to y, or x is or I guess in this case if x is equal to y and z is equal to w, then using the double square brackets, I throw in my two expressions with the and in between. So if you're not crazy about the -a for ands, right, this is the equivalent syntax but using the double square brackets. And again, we'll come back to the double square brackets for expression matching as well later. All right, just to have a quick play with that, let's see, where did I stick this? That must be in the if.h. So let's take a look at what I stuck in this file, and especially since I can't remember either. What have we got? Okay, so this is just going through. This script is going to get the user to enter two integers, x and y, and just do some comparisons, right? We'll do some basic math comparisons first. If x is equal to y, we'll tell them they're the same. If x is less than, we'll say x is smaller, and otherwise we'll say x is bigger. So just one quick set with the arithmetic comparisons, and then we'll do the same sort of thing with string comparisons, get the user to enter two words, read them in, see if they're equal, see if the first one's less than, and again, that's basically just doing the ASCII comparison less than. And then finally, we'll get the user to enter a file name and just check if the file exists using the -f. So just have a quick play with some of the beasties that we've tried here. So let's give this a whirl. And again, hopefully no syntax errors in here. So it's asking us to enter two integers. So I enter, 203 and 7,029. And sure enough, it goes through and tells us that, echoes the two values and tells us that 203 is smaller, right? So that was our first stretch there. We'll get it to try two words. If I try blah and foo, then it's going to go through and say blah is smaller, right? It's just doing sort of an alphabetic comparison. And it asks us for a file name. So we'll try foo again, and it's probably going to tell us that foo doesn't exist. Yeah, no file foo found. So again, you can have a bit of a play with this. Once you get past the basic syntax oddness, it all flows fairly well. All right, we will leave it there. We'll talk about loops in the near future.